This is the world map of mitochondrial haplogroups. For instance, in the Americas, it's haplogroup A, B, C, D. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the one that uh, gave this order was thinking about consensus entry through Beringia and then A, B, C, D that were the ones that were known at the time. So it seems the story goes that the researcher was trying to organize the mitochondrial haplogroups of the Americas and gave this numbering A, B, C, D. But before going into this map and to see which continent leaks, I just want to show something about Beringia itself. In consensus, Africans leave Africa and well, populate Eurasia and move towards Beringia, Bering Strait, enter the Americas and populate the Americas. And this should lead to A, B, C, D. It seems pretty good, but now about Beringia. What about it? Well, first, the map says that emerged areas in the Ice Age white. So you see that all over the world there were areas that at the time emerged. This is not included because this shows that it's not populated. So areas where there was a lot of loss of land is uh, Southeast Asia and between Australia and Papua New Guinea. And while they were together, they were called Sahul. But today it's Australia, Papua New Guinea. The same here, this region, that was one region, was called Sundaland or Sunda. And these were important regions. There's even an important region, that was an important region that submerged uh, in the Holocene. Um, I think it was called Doggerland. And while all this region was much bigger, it was also under ice. Even today, and that's what we'll talk about, this region is permafrost. There's important parts of permafrost in this region as well. But the deepest permafrost is this is the upriver, this is the Yenisei River, this is what they call the Goose, and from the Yenisei on, this is all permafrost. Even the seas are frozen. So this is important. This is the route according to consensus, and I claim that Africans wouldn't have no reason to enter in this permafrost region for thousands of kilometers. This would be like a death sentence. And at least when it comes to haplogroup R, the one I gave you example that it turned over in Britain and in Iberia 4,250 years ago, there was not even a bridge. So if they were in need for a bridge, apart from surpassing all this permafrost, this immense permafrost, there was also no bridge. And if they were able to cross, they would encounter permafrost again. And apart from that, these regions are very mountainous. Mountainous. And apart from that, the rivers point in the wrong direction. The migrants have no help from the rivers in this region. They have to move, let's say, horizontally, and the rivers are vertical. So they are rather barriers than of any help. Why is this whole region so deep permafrost? Why is it a dead zone? And of course, what consensus claim is that they state these migrants from Africa followed this route because the haplogroup encountered here, which is Q, M242, is dominant in the Americas. So, but it's higher up than this route. But that's okay. Anyhow, this route is in permafrost. So this region is the Arctic Circle. It's a sea, or it's rather a frozen sea. Now, to orientate you a bit, this is Greenland, this is Canada, this is Alaska, this is Russia, still Russia, and this is Scandinavia. This is what they call the Goose, Nova Zembla. This is the Up River, and this is the Yenisei River. They will be very important in our action plan. So, why this region from the Goose on knows this deep permafrost until Beringia, Bering Strait, and even further, but this is the worst of the planet. This is in the Arctic Circle, and this is the route that the Africans are supposed to follow before they enter Alaska, again in permafrost. So why? That is because the Bering Strait is closed, it's very undeep, there is no warm current coming into it. While here between Greenland and Scandinavia, there's an Atlantic water inflow. It's a warm water current, and it presents upward heat flux. So until the Goose and Greenland, it can keep life going. Not all water is frozen, at least not from here on. And here everything is frozen. And that's because the current cannot go in and, of course, will cool down. And here no current can come in, so the cold stagnates and freezes everything to permafrost, and especially here. So why would the Africans leave here where they are supposed to have been, at the border of what I call the dead zone, of the worst permafrost of this planet? And why would they traverse it thousands of kilometers, confronting mountains and confronting rivers that are frozen and are in the opposite direction? So, well, that's difficult to understand, but that is what consensus claims. So I'll show it here again. This is Arctic Circle here. It's really a circle. It's a few thousand kilometers in diameter. This again is Greenland, Scandinavia. This is the Goose, Nova Zembla. This is the Up, and this is the Yenisei River. And here they are supposed to have, well, stayed, the Africans. This is the Caspian Sea. This is the Himalayas, so they come from very far. And they should go north until the Arctic Circle to enter what I call a dead zone, permafrost, the worst permafrost in the world. Continuous permafrost, 90% coverage. Travel thousands of kilometers, at least in the case of the ones that cause the population turnover event that I showed, that is David Reich research. If they still had to cross it at the time, because that's something David Reich claims, that the Yamnaya that come from the east, that they at some point will go to this dead zone, to North America, Central America, South America, to do a similar population turnover event also in the Amazon forest. So I have a lot of doubts, but my biggest doubt is, why should they go and meet the permafrost and this region of thousands of kilometers? And if they really were doing this like 4,000, 5,000 years ago, there was no ice bridge anymore. So that was my biggest doubt. And we know why. This is the Goose, Up, Yenisei. This is the permafrost. This is Beringia, Bering Strait. So we know why it's there. Why all this region is a dead zone. I call it a dead zone officially. Officially, it's not a dead zone. I call it a dead zone. Then, now we come to the first mitochondrial haplogroup. This is haplogroup A, the one that entered first according to consensus. You see it here, really present here, where where you would expect A, according to the consensus. You see it here, but you don't see any connection with Africa. On the other hand, it has a connection with the Amazon, not a very strong connection. It has more connection with Central America. More about that later. You even see that there is a disconnection with the region where the Africans are supposed to have passed. Its frequency is becoming the lowest, and there's no connection with Africa. Strangely, there is at least some connection with this Arctic coast. And there is more connection with China and Asia, and here somewhere above Altai, than there is with any other place in the world. In fact, there is with what I call as a reference St. Petersburg, and this would be like France, possibly Belgium, I think it's France, Anatolia, and Iraq, Iran, Mesopotamia, Caspian Sea, east, where the steppes are. So, while it's in the place that they say it is, it has no connection with the root. So I go to the next image. This is B. After A came B. And again, there's some concentration. But again, there's no connection with Africa. This is the Nile Delta. Again, it's rather close to St. Petersburg. Again, Caspian Sea, and so on. It doesn't matter the details. But there's a disconnection. There's a disconnection. There shouldn't be a disconnection. There's no connection with Africa. There shouldn't be a connection with Africa. And if this place has a connection, then it has a connection with Western South America. Peru, I suppose. Peru. Also with South America. And very strangely, with Madagascar, and here a tip of Africa, but I should say that's an extension of Madagascar, and New Zealand. And I claim that apart from this route, that is presented in other places, that will bring them to North America, I think I showed the currents. The currents are dominantly here and leave automatically here and back. So they could have brought to New Zealand. It cannot go from New Zealand. Well, it can, because the current is like this. But New Zealand has no connection with the rest. It could have come from, it cannot come from Southeast Asia or East Asia, Far East Asia, because the current doesn't help. And probably this current is close or in Arctic regions, so it would probably turn out to be deadly. We know that the Pacific Current leads to Southeast Asia, also to Australia and Papua New Guinea. And there's possibilities, there's currents, they're not so strong, that lead to Madagascar. But there's no leaking into Africa. And of course, we're talking about the opposite direction. But anyhow, it reached Madagascar. If this was the source, or this was the source, or this was the source, or this was the source, it reached Madagascar. And there is no way that Madagascar could have leaked to these regions, because it could have leaked until here, but not against this very strong current. So again, it seems to be out of America, out of South America. You cannot call it the Amazon, because the Amazon is more or less here. It will touch and penetrate slightly the Amazon forest. This is C. C was supposed to be here, and you can find it here. But connection with Africa. Discontinuity, not totally, in this region. It is in this region, but then it's discontinuous, at least until Alaska. And this is the region where the Africans are supposed to have passed. There's no continuity. So, if it would have leaked here, it would have arrived and could have followed this route. Or another route that I will often mention is Mackenzie River. Following the Mackenzie River avoids permafrost. And then to demonstrate it in a more easier form, it will end up in up Yenisei, rather Yenisei. And the map is deformed because this distance, in fact, goes. I will show you another map. This is only 3,000 kilometers, but that's because of the format of the map. Because in fact they are touching. I'll show you in other maps. Now we come to D. D was supposed to be here. And this is a more recent map. Instead, this is amongst all the maps until now, this is more than others in the Amazon forest. And if it would have populated this region, this is part of the route that is Papua New Guinea, Philippines, and this is Korea, but this is before Korea. This is the Yangtze River. It could have been an entry to the region here, but it could have populated the same way, the 3,000 kilometers. In fact, it could take this route. And you see there is a concentration between this river and this river. This must be the Lena River, so it uses the rivers to go south. Because, as said, from the nose to Beringia is all permafrost. Only very specialized groups can survive there. What do these people have that live here? They have the fat digesting gene of the Amarants. In the world, only the Amarants have the fat digesting gene. You could wonder why they should have it. That's for other videos. But for this people, it's quite obvious why they have it. They feed on seals and whales and on fatty animals, like possibly polar bears. Probably more or less here you have Balkai Lake. It's a very large lake and it has an immense number of freshwater seals. Anyhow, there is no connection with Africa, this time not even with Madagascar. And there's a relative discontinuity, not as strong as in the other map. Now we come to M. We didn't see M in a more classic map. I will discuss it in a minute. This one goes in a very long, low frequency, has something to do with Africa, but not really with sub-Saharan Africa, again with Madagascar. But it's all very low frequency, but it's the first map that something in Africa appears. It still appears in not the right part, because it's Africans are supposed to have migrated from sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you for watching. Bye.